So I've dedicated this talk to a team of people who can be considered the unsung heroes of video games, customer service. But first, a little bit about CCP. Who are we? We are a video games company that was founded in 1997 in Iceland. We're best known for EVE Online, that's our flagship product. Long story short, a bunch of crazy guys got the idea one evening in a bar to make a video game. And they wanted to not just make any video game, they wanted to make an MMO from scratch without an engine or anything. No, we're just going to make an MMO. Yeah, I'm pretty sure those guys, they were wasted at the time when they got that idea. But at least they had enough sense to know that making games is expensive. So in order to realize this dream they had of making a game, they needed some funding. So here's another fun fact. We didn't actually start as a video games company at all. Our first product was a board game. This is that board game, Hættuspil. This was the Christmas present that every kid wanted back in 1998. And thankfully, it was so successful that we raised enough seed money to start development on EVE Online. So this guy here on the box, in drag on the box art, you see him. Another fun fact, 12 years later in 2010, this guy actually became the mayor of Reykjavik, the city where CCP is based. So it's a pretty strange world, isn't it? But then it wasn't until 2003 that we released our first game, which was EVE Online. But what's this EVE Online thing? Well, again, it's our flagship product. It's been going now for 20 years. We entered our third decade in May this year. EVE is a single-sharded sandbox PvPvE MMO. I know that's a mouthful. There's an emphasis on PvP in the game. The VE is kind of an extra. The game's economy is player-driven. Almost every item in the game is actually made by the players themselves from materials that they've gathered. And loss in EVE has meaning. All those items that the players make, if they're destroyed, they're gone forever, permanently. And EVE is a PvP-centric game, like I said, so things do get lost all the time. The universe we've created is a cutthroat one, that's intentional. How harsh is it? To give you an example, scams are allowed in EVE, unlike most games. If you don't abuse any game exploit to scam another player, that's all right. Social engineering, plain old trickery, A-OK in EVE. I know it sounds weird, but that's the game we have. But as you can imagine, based on hearing that, there are some issues in EVE that inherently cannot really be solved to every customer's satisfaction. The scale of the game is huge, just like space. We have battles in the game that include thousands upon thousands of players, all fighting simultaneously in the same place. It can get quite chaotic, and as you can imagine, if something goes wrong in a battle like that, if we take an action to the benefit of one person, other people might get pissed off. So it's quite a challenge. All of this combined makes the game a real bitch to support at times. Yeah, my boss told me to take that out, but I left it in. EVE is epic, awe-inspiring, and it spawned countless legendary stories. Many people love to just read about EVE, even though they've never actually played the game. There are fascinating stories out there concerning everything from theft and subterfuge to massive battles of galactic proportions. The gameplay itself can be exceedingly complex to a point where the game sometimes affectionately referred to as spreadsheets in space by our players. This is a real in-game screenshot. No, I'm screwing with you. It's not. But I saw a joke on Reddit the other day. Goes like this. what do you do if you're at work, your boss is coming to your desk, and you're playing a game? And most players, they can just say, hey, I alt-tab out of the game, because that's what you do, right? But if you're an EVE player, you don't even have to do that. You can just say that you're doing your taxes. But there is some truth to these jokes, because this summer, in collaboration with Microsoft, we actually launched an official integration into Microsoft Excel. For real, I'm not joking this time, this is real. You can go check it out. EVE is free to play, so go ahead, check it out. But that's not to say, though, that EVE is an ugly game. The game is actually incredibly beautiful. Our artists, they are some of the most beloved staff members at CCP. They're a team that's extremely popular with our players, and at our annual FanFest, they get a lot of love. But wait a second, I'm not here to talk about those rock stars. I'm here to talk about customer support. Yeah, are you guys excited? So let's briefly go into some key metrics and numbers to contextualize what we're doing. So last year, we had around 215,000 contacts, human contacts. That's a pretty typical year for us. We have 2 expansions each year, one in spring, one in winter. We released this year's winter expansion this week, actually, on Tuesday. So it's been quite a busy week for me with traveling and all that. Our service level agreement target is responding to 80% of ticket volume within a defined SLA. And a ticket's SLA is based on its category, and it ranges from 1 hour for game-breaking issue types to 24 for your average issue and 72 hours for extremely complex problems. This is how we've been doing so far in 2023. We started off a little rocky at the beginning of the year, but this summer we kind of kicked it up into high gear, and it looks like we're going to end the year on a high note, hopefully. We also have a customer satisfaction survey, which is a yes/no, were you satisfied style question. Our survey response rate's about 30%, so it's we can actually believe the results we get from there. The target is to have above 90% CSAT in tickets, which in other words means we want more than 9 out of 10 customers to say that they were happy with the support we gave them. And have we managed to actually achieve this? Yes, we actually have. We've been consistently above 90% since 2017. This is the success metric that we consider to be the most important one, and we're extremely proud of where we're at today. It's a number that we consider excellent. It's our crown jewel, if you will. But hitting this CSAT, it did not happen overnight. This took time, experimentation, and constant iteration. It's a never-ending process. There's no silver bullet to providing good support. And for every success story that we have, there are failures too. But what we've been lucky to have is time. We've got 20 years of making mistakes behind us at this point. I would be lying if I said that I knew it all and had all the answers. We're still learning every day. But what I can do here today is tell you what has worked for us and walk you through some of the key projects and learnings that led us to where we're at today. The first one I'm going to talk about is called Outreach. It's a project that leverages our frontline staff's product knowledge to improve retention. In practical terms, what that means is that we talk directly to users. It's a live human, one-on-one with a customer, pretty straightforward, right? There's 2 types of outreach that we do. The first one's called meet and greet. It's literally greeting a new player in their first few hours of gameplay. We try to solve simple problems, we answer questions, we give them a small gift that's appropriate for a new player, and finally we try to nudge them towards what we found to be desired player behavior, which is joining a corporation. If you're not aware, a corporation's EVE's version of a guild. These conversations are friendly, casual conversations. We avoid all corporate speak, all marketing speak. There's no upselling here. It's just a conversation. The other type of outreach is called Magic Moments, and this is an idea that was born from player research that we did a few years back. We found that a user's first devastating loss of a spaceship could be a make or break moment for whether the user was going to churn or be retained. A devastating loss in EVE is defined as a loss that consists of the majority of the user's net worth in the game. What we do in that conversation is that we try to equip the user with knowledge. We explain that loss is part of what makes EVE special. We point out better tactics and ship equipment that they could have used to avoid the loss. We point the player towards player corporations if they haven't joined one already. And in the vast majority of cases, we end the conversation by giving them that first ship loss back, no questions asked. The outreach program was launched to tackle a very specific problem this year. This is an old meme picture that I love to show. I think it's from like 2008. You can see some games there that don't exist anymore. But unfortunately, there is some truth to this meme. It might not be that bad, though. But development on EVE has historically been more focused on veterans than on new players. We've never quite mastered that new player onboarding journey. It's hard to get into EVE, and it shows in our funnel numbers, sadly. I can't show you the numbers, the actual numbers, but the top of our funnel is quite dreadful looking. We are below industry average in retaining new users past the first few days. But when you get invested in the game, it is extremely sticky. People stick around for a long time, and that's where our numbers shine. We're well above the industry average for retaining users into month 2, 3, and beyond. So in 2019, it took us a while, but in 2019, we decided we're going to do something about this. So we threw down the gauntlet to tackle the problem and adopted a company-wide embrace new player strategy. And of course, we in player experience, we were asked, what can you do? And we were like, oh shit, we have to do something. But outreach is what we came up with. That was our contribution to this strategy. This is what the tool looks like. It's a homebrew tool that we developed for this purpose. It's pretty much a queue which agents can use to pick a player to talk to. And there are a bunch of options there enabling filtering for very specific criteria. This is helpful to us because it lets us rapidly experiment when we get new ideas of a new type of outreach conversation that we can try out. The team is a team of 15 to 20 people, depending on seasonality and marketing focus. It's a work-from-home team with our main outsourcing vendor, and we're only doing English at the moment because scaling up to other languages is quite a challenge. There have been indirect benefits to this program as well as direct ones. Probably the biggest one is feedback, because by having these conversations with players at such an early stage, we got a window into a segment of our users that didn't stick around long enough previously for us to ever hear about their issues. So we were blind to problems that we have since managed to fix in our top funnel. It's also been a great PR tool. We almost every week see posts on social media where people are amazed that they're actually talking to an employee of the company. But how do we really know that this is a success? I mean, thankfully, the core objective of this program is extremely measurable, and that's retention. So, greeted users, they make it to their second logon day at a much higher rate than the control group. Since this is so close to the top of the funnel, any percentage matters, but 18%, that blew our expectations away. And there's actually a statistically meaningful increase in engagement and retention from day 2 to day 15 and even beyond that. So it's already looking pretty good, right? We're having an effect on retention. Pretty sweet. But monetization is also positively impacted compared to control. Contacted users make their first purchase at a higher rate. It's 27% higher for meet and greets and 13% for magic moments. But it's not only the first purchase that's affected. We also see a revenue increase over the player's first 6 months, and we want to take credit for those first 6 months. We can't really take credit for anything that happens much later than that. But as you can see, it's a pretty significant increase, 36 to 38%. Now, being a customer service professional, I don't particularly like to use the words cost center. But I have to face the fact that from looking from the outside in, that's what we look like, that's what we are. And reliably measuring the value a strong support team has brings to a company is super, super difficult. The outreach program has, however, enabled us to do just that. It's enabled us to put a dollar value to some of the work that we do, which is a really nice change of pace. And the program, it actually more than pays for itself, so it's net positive. In a sense, the project has been a great success for us, but what about the players? Do they care? How has this program been received by them? Well, we've actually really just felt the appreciation. Generally speaking, the players, they absolutely love it. But if you're wondering, can this be automated? Then we had that question ourselves, and we tried it. It didn't work. We didn't have the same results as when a human was involved. It seems that it's the personal human touch that's the secret sauce to making this really work. The next project I'm going to talk about is called AAB, or Above and Beyond. AAB is all about giving agency to frontline staff to make customers happy in case of a service failure of some kind. We figured that there is a context to every problem that a written policy or a procedure just cannot account for. And we wanted to equip our agents to make this context a part of the equation. So this here is a copy of most of the procedure. It's available to all of our agents, no matter their experience level. We wanted to avoid unnecessary feedback loops where agents need to contact a senior or a manager for approval in order to make an exception. Our thought process was that if agents have to jump through hoops to help the customer, it isn't actually going to happen as often as it should. But what kind of context are we talking about? What's a service failure? Now, the procedure is intentionally vague on this point. It's up for interpretation by design. These guidelines here that I've highlighted in red are pretty much the only thing that the agents are given up front. Unscheduled downtimes or a long waiting time in a support ticket are good examples of what a service failure could be. That being said, it's not just about making customers happy. It's also about empowering our agents. The theory that we have is that a happy agent who doesn't feel overly constrained by a silly policy written by a manager will perform a lot better than an agent that doesn't. You know, these damn managers who make the procedures. They don't actually know what it's like on the floor, right? Who hasn't had that experience? We were inspired by a success story we found by the Ritz-Carlton hotel chain. In short, what they do is that they encourage their staff, every employee, to use up to $2,000 to solve guest issues or otherwise just really enhance the experience of any guest. Pretty neat, right? Forbes has a story about this. That's the title of the article. That's pretty fun and cute that I want to share with you. So there was this guest that, when leaving the hotel after a wonderful weekend at the resort, could not find their boy's beloved Thomas the Tank Engine toy. They explained this to the staff when they were leaving, and how this was the boy's favorite toy. It's going to be heartbreaking for them if they don't get it back. But search as they might, the staff just could not find the toy after the guest had left. So what can you do? But realizing that this was a big deal to this particular customer, they drove out to a toy store. They bought a new toy. They composed a handwritten letter from Thomas the Tank Engine himself, detailing all the adventures that he'd had at the resort in the missing days. 4 days later, the boy gets the toy and the letter, and he's ecstatic. His parents obviously are super happy too, so they share the story, and the story goes viral. And the positive PR greatly outweighed any cost that this incurred for Ritz-Carlton. I mean, I'm telling you about it right now. So that's pretty cool, right? I encourage you to read that story if you're interested. It's a really interesting read. But how do we do this? Practically speaking, we've defined levels of inconvenience. The level of compensation that's open to an agent is given based on these levels. $2,000 is a little too rich for us. To give you an example, an agent cannot give a full year of free EVE subscription time for a minor inconvenience. But if it was a major game-breaking inconvenience, well, then they can. There are 3 levels. We have slight inconvenience, moderate inconvenience, and game-breaking inconvenience. And like these earlier guidelines that are still there on the screen, these are intentionally kept awake. It's up to agents' interpretation to figure out which level an inconvenience classifies as. The compensation that we give the user is usually subscription time. We've just found that's what our players want. The agents are allowed to get creative when the situation calls for it. They can even give the user a choice from a bunch of options of what they want to make things right. AAP is a project that can lead to magic moments for the customer, and in turn can make your support team go viral because they truly went above and beyond. We have seen this happen on numerous occasions, and it brings a smile to our face every time. Next up is Trias. Trias is prioritizing tickets based on the impact that the issue has on the customer. All issues are important, but some are more urgent. Sounds like common sense, right? To give you some specifics, in EVE, there are issues that can be entirely game-breaking for a customer. Inability to log in, extreme harassment in chat, a player's mission isn't completing, so they cannot progress. All of these issues, they stop the player in their tracks and can end the game session. Now, other issues, while they're just as important, they can wait a little bit longer for resolution because they don't stop the game session entirely. What we've done is we've identified these game-breaking problems, and we route them into a top priority queue. This queue is staffed 24/7 with an SLA target of 1 hour. But in reality, 99.9% of cases in this queue get a first reply within 15 minutes. And it's actually a pretty significant volume. 30% of our total volume is considered top priority, which is kind of an added side benefit because that means that 30% of our volume never becomes part of any backlog. That's every support manager's dream. But in our experience, the first in, first out approach, it just does not work. It sounds nice. Sounds nice on paper, but the reality just is that some issues are more urgent and impactful to the user. And the price of not doing Trias is that the player could churn out. The user's tolerance to waiting is vastly lower if the issue is game-breaking to them. Imagine a user who sits down on a Friday evening, and for some reason they're unable to enjoy or play your game. If it's a hardcore user, this might not just be an inconvenience, it might actually ruin their whole plan for the weekend. We have players like that. Your team needs to step in to address this, and you don't want that to happen on Monday once the weekend has been ruined. This person's tolerance to waiting is going to be much lower than average, right? Our research also indicates that there's extremely strong correlation between reply times and CSAT. This here is our CSAT metrics for 2023 to try to back that up. We've divided it into buckets of first reply time brackets. As you can see, there's just a clear drop-off in CSAT as response times go up. Might not be a big surprise to anyone here. I mean, people want fast support, right? But knowing that, why wouldn't you just keep reply times low across the board? Well, I don't know about you, but we don't have unlimited money to spend on support agents. If you do, go for it. I don't think it's an option for any gaming company, really, and that's where Trias comes in. So my advice is focus first and foremost on those urgent issues. Some of you might be doing it already, but speaking to peers in the industry, I've found or gotten the impression that this isn't as common as it should be. But if you manage to do that, have good Trias, then you've taken a very impactful step towards providing fantastic support to your users. The next project is called EVoice. This is a sort of tone of voice / style guide for agents. Among other things, it has formatting rules which help agents improve readability of their answers. For example, how links are presented, when to use line breaks, that type of thing, because nobody likes a wall of text, right? We also want the language that our agents use to fit the issue at hand, because context matters. Users, for example, might not react well to emojis if they're upset, and the ticket outcome can also dictate what the right tone for the engagement is. If we're telling a player that we can't help them with something, we definitely do not want to be too casual when we're delivering that message. The issue type is also considered. We use more formal language for payment issues or bans, while more light-hearted language is used, maybe even sprinkled with some game lingo, for gameplay problems. Another example is how we greet users. If the user signs a ticket with their real name, we'll use that. Otherwise, we'll try to use their game handle. But if we don't know that for some reason, then we use Capsuleer, which is a generic EVE lore term. What about roleplay? Is that ever appropriate? We experimented with this, and we found that it's only really appropriate if the user writes their ticket in that way. We can match their style. An example of roleplay would be turning something that's cut and dry, like I've reset your mission, to I've talked to the agent and he's willing to give you another shot at working for the Galente Federation. You can add a little flavor like this if the customer seems to be in the mood for it. Before EVoice, a common point of contention when speaking with unhappy users was how they felt our agents were hiding behind the word we. We cannot help, our hands are tied, that type of language. So we changed this, and now our agents use the word I instead of we most of the time. And for some reason, this tiny little touch that took us 5 minutes to implement, it has had a meaningful impact. Finally, we have this glossary, which is a helpful reference to our agents. They might not all be super up to date with 20 years of EVE lingo. I mean, would you know what AVox means if it wasn't written right up there? I probably wouldn't know. I use this glossary quite often myself, even though I've been an EVE player for almost 20 years at this point. But yeah, this is extremely helpful when we're training new agents. Next up, leveraging your agent's product knowledge. Your agents know your product better than most. They see user reports. They have access to internal information, maybe even design documents. Your frontline staff has a deep understanding of what works and what doesn't work in your product. They're a well of knowledge that's unfortunately far too often ignored. And no matter how well your product is designed, your users likely won't always use features exactly as you intended. If this is the case, your agents are going to know about it. And as developers, we often have a blind spot to this kind of issue. So in essence, frontline support staff are the team that's closest to your customers. They're in a prime spot to relay to the rest of your team how your customers actually engage with your game. So try to work with your agents and leverage this knowledge. But how? How do I do that? You could try by just asking them. If you're a support manager, use the one-on-ones for more than just performance management. If you're on the game dev side, take some time to talk to your support team every now and then. Ask the agents what the real problems are. It sounds straightforward, and it really is, but in our industry, this does not happen enough. It's kind of a trap that many support teams fall into. They're on autopilot, they're laser focused on only direct, measurable performance. They forget about the positive effect that they can have on the company as a whole, outside of their primary role. But it's not all up to the support teams either. On the game dev side, too many teams are happy to just ignore support, and they just let them do their thing in peace in their own corner. They don't realize that together, the two disciplines can become greater than their sum. I'd also recommend regular agent shadowing sessions. You can shadow an agent and see how they work, see what issues they encounter. You'll spot areas of improvement that won't necessarily be highlighted by any metric. Another issue that shadowing might expose or help mitigate is when your support team masks a problem by just being too effective. What I mean by that is that sometimes our agents, they come up with such great workarounds for problems that the problem is never actually raised to the dev team. So since it's never known to the developers, the root cause of the problem is never addressed. We've also embedded agents directly into our development teams. Each feature team in EVE has a support agent attached to it. They are, for all intents and purposes, a part of the dev team. They attend meetings and daily stand-ups and all that. And this has led to agents building personal relationships with the developers, which breaks down walls. New feedback loops are created and existing ones are strengthened. The dev teams, they were pretty hesitant to this at first, but now, about 10 years later, whenever a new team is forming, it's actually them that usually comes to us and says, hey, where's my agent? And the agents, they love it. They feel empowered and they're happy to be listened to and be involved in the game dev process. So if you're a producer, a game producer for a dev team, consider giving this a shot. It could be mutually beneficial to both the game team and the support team. Finally, make your managers do tickets. It's healthy for management to get their hands dirty every now and then. We actually went one step further back in the day. We did something we called a mass day. What that meant is that every single employee of the company, the CEO included, did tickets for one day. I think it actually might have been the CEO's idea to begin with, otherwise how would we have gotten buy-in to make it happen? But through this mass day, the devs, they gained a better understanding of issues that our customers face. And it also led to a lot of improvements to our support tool suite. The programmers, they saw firsthand how the game is supported, and they went, we can make this better. So almost overnight, it took maybe a week or two, our team became much more efficient because our tool suite got much stronger. And speaking of tools, your agents, they need tools. They need logs. They can't help if they can't see what happened. And if they don't have buttons to press, they're not going to be able to help either. It's obvious when it's spelled out, but most support teams in the industry, they don't have nearly all the logs and tools that they need. We were no exception to that issue. We'd beg and cry and call in favors, but we never really could secure the resources we needed from other teams. I mean, who has time for that? We're making a game here, people, right? So what can you do? Well, what we did is we just made our own team. So we now have a team of engineers, there's 4 of them, reporting to PX management. It was a really hard initial sell, but it was worth the fight in the long run. And at this point, everybody at the company is on board, because we stopped nagging them for improvements, we just do it ourselves. And your agents, they need tools. Without them, there's going to be a really low ceiling to how effective your support team can be. It's great customer service just isn't happening unless you have the tools to provide it. Like that outreach tool I showed earlier, we made that. There's no way we could have done that with resources from a game dev team. They would not have had time to make that for us. Next up, translation software. Does it work? Is the tech there yet? That's a question we had last year. Our main worry was that game-specific lingo would not translate well. So we decided to try something new. We did a little proprietary dev work and ran a trial to answer this question. And the answer we arrived at is yes, it works, at least for us. The trial was such a resounding success that we have moved over to this model entirely now. And furthermore, we did not see a meaningful reduction in CSAT at all. This is a topic where I actually had to eat my own hat. I thought we'd have a big drop in CSAT, but that wasn't the case. We were extremely happy with that result, since for a company of our size, language support can be really fragile. We don't really have the redundancy in place for our low-volume languages to provide the support we want to provide. And all agents now handle tickets in every supported language. I think one of the keys to that being a success for us is that we tell the user up front that we're using machine translations. This reduces friction, and ultimately our players seem to prefer that they're getting faster service over perfect linguistics. We still do have native speakers in our team. Don't get me wrong, you probably still need them, because you need these people to help the other agents in your team understand delicate situations and cultural nuances. So this is still an option to our team for when it's needed. So key benefits, we don't have a scheduling nightmare anymore for our low volume languages. We also have faster support, leading to better SLA overall. There's no need to wait for that native language speaker in the vast majority of cases. And the speed doesn't come at the cost of CSAT. If there was a hit to it, then it's balanced out by faster response times. Another benefit is that we managed to make our ticket system a lot less complex, because there's no longer a need to route tickets to the right agents. We don't need to, say, hide French tickets from English speakers. They're all working in the same pool now. But why bother with good support? Like, is it really necessary to invest in it? Isn't it just a money sink, a cost center, a black hole? All of this stuff I've been talking about, it sounds like a lot of effort, right? Why go that extra mile? Well, if you're still here in the room, which all of you are, then I hope I don't have to answer this question. But perhaps you're still wondering. Perhaps you need a line to feed your boss with once you get back home from Lisbon, or perhaps you are that boss. But anyway, there are a couple thoughts that I want to arm you with. The first one is the service recovery paradox. So the service recovery paradox is explained quite well by this picture that I stole off the internet. In short, a customer has an issue with your product, a service failure of some kind. If the issue is corrected by your service team in an exceptional fashion, the customer is actually more likely to continue using the product or service than if they had no problem at all to begin with. Sounds a bit counterintuitive, but yeah. Now, I'm not a psychologist, but it's not really that difficult to imagine why a positive service engagement, if smooth and painless, can be a positive moment of engagement, potentially creating more loyalty and investment in your brand. Your customer is wowed by how your team did. They know now that they can trust your team to do right by them in the future if they have any issues. A connection has been made between your team and your customer, and you're no longer just this faceless corporate entity. And if you're lucky, the service engagement could even become a magic moment and go viral. We've talked a bit about that earlier, right? But wait right there, stop. Is this actually a real thing, or is this just some pseudoscience nonsense? That's a good question. I have that question myself, even still to this day. So this concept, it's been around since the early 90s, and I'll be honest with you, as of yet, it's an unproven theory. Studies into this phenomenon have had mixed results. I'm not going to get into those, but if you're interested, Google it. There's a lot of literature out there on the subject. Now, I personally do believe that it is real, but that it doesn't necessarily apply to all products. What I think might be a missing factor or element that the studies haven't accounted for is passion. To make an example, not many people are passionate about washing machines, right? It's just an appliance. It's a necessity in a modern household. I don't think washing machines are the primary hobby of many people. Is anyone here like a hardcore washing machine enthusiast? Maybe a little bit. Yeah, probably not. So I picked this actually for a reason. I have a personal anecdote, no joke. 2 weeks ago, my washing machine broke for the second time in 1 year. I'm really upset about that. I actually had a pretty okay service experience. I'm getting a new replacement next week. But despite that, I'm not going to buy the same brand again when I'm next in the market. And the reason for that is that I really just don't care about the brand of washing machine as long as it works and cleans my clothes. So even though they've done right by me, there's just no passion there, right? But what we do is we make games. And just like us, our players, they are passionate about the games they play. So to be clear with you, this was a long story, but I don't actually have a conclusive answer for you on whether it's real or not. But the best concrete material I can present to back it up is a little case study we did on EVE. So ship reimbursement is a common support ticket topic in EVE. People lose their in-game spaceship, boom, it's gone permanently. Said that at the beginning, right? For some reason, the player thinks that this isn't right. Maybe they think there was a bug that caused the ship loss, maybe a server issue. But for whatever reason, they file a ticket asking for the ship back. And then our team decides, based on a review of game logs, whether to return the ship or not. Now, given that a lot of time and effort goes into these investigations, we wanted to know if it was worth doing. We want to know if there's any if the outcome of the ticket has any effect on retention. So we launched a little study into that, and we looked at data for 3 groups of users. These groups are users that lost a ship but didn't file a ticket, people that lost a ship, filed a ticket, and got a no answer, you're not getting your ship back, and then the people that filed a ticket and they did get a ship back. Furthermore, we limited the sample to paying users that had experienced a significant ship loss in the first 3 months of gameplay. This here is what I thought was the most interesting outcome of that study. I don't have time to go over the whole study. What it shows is the percentage of users that were still active paying subscribers 1 year later after they asked for their ship back. And I think this graph actually speaks for itself. Like, it's pretty clear that the green column there, it's pretty clear that the reimbursement event, it had a significant effect on long-term retention. Is this an example of service recovery? I think it is, but yeah, it's not proven. I'm not a scientist. Another thing I thought was quite interesting to note is how the other 2 columns, they're almost identical. You'd think that there'd be a drop-off of users who had a negative outcome of their ticket, right? The people that didn't get a ship back. How come they are performing the same as the baseline? I think that, again, comes down to passion. So there's no doubt a bunch of players that decided to leave when we didn't give their ship back. But we can presume that these people in the orange column, because they bothered to even file a ticket to begin with, they probably were more engaged and invested in the game to begin with than the people that didn't bother to send in a ticket. So my theory is that this orange group is just a little more passionate about the game than the blue group, on average. And this passion then balances out the fact that the orange group got well, what could be perceived as poor service. Don't know if that makes sense to you, but it makes sense to me. Let's go back to this picture for a moment. What it doesn't show is users that experienced service failure but weren't recovered. In other words, the users that got shitty service. Do you think that those users will perform just as well as the blue line, the customer that had no service failure? Like, probably not, right? At least that's what I think. I want to stress that whether you believe in the theory or not, I am not advocating that anyone ever considers intentionally creating issues in their game to harness this effect. That would be ridiculous, right? Absolutely not. Far from it. But I think most game devs will relate to what I'm about to say, and that's that making a perfect issue-free game is a pipe dream. There's going to be issues, and that's why you need a good support team. If you don't, then your customers will get shitty service, and that could lead to churn. If you do have a good team, however, then you could have a force multiplier at your hands to help with retention. But there are other benefits to having a strong support team, magic moments, good PR, going viral. We talked about that before. It's impossible to quantify, but I don't think I really need to explain why it's a great thing. Like, remember that Ritz-Carlton story from before. And also, there can be plenty of hidden cost savings to be had. If you have a 24/7 team, some costs could be rather easily absorbed by your support team, saving your company a lot of money. The best example of this is live operations duty, such as reacting to server alerts. This is easy to do with a little training. We do this at CCP. Our outsourced team, they monitor automated alerts and status dashboards as a side duty. This duty ranges from watching server performance graphs to actioning suspected fraud. And none of this necessitates hiring expensive dedicated staff. Our support agents, they are really damn good at this. And thanks to that, our IT team is shielded quite a bit from expensive on-call during ungodly hours, which would be a cost that otherwise would be incurred. We did some math once and we came up with a crazy number, but I won't share it, it's too crazy. I'm going to conclude the talk with a few nuggets of knowledge that didn't fit anywhere else, just rapid fire stuff. If you want to know more, you can ask me after this. First off, ensure that the customer understands why something happened. Don't just tell your customer no. Make sure it's at the very least a learning moment for your customer. Give them some advice on how to avoid the same situation in the future. And when it comes to offensive content moderation, you need to have a fast feedback loop. Harassment has to be actioned quickly. We found that if action is delayed, even if it takes an hour or two, there is a much higher chance of repeat offenses. And not to mention that the victim is going to feel ignored if they perceive that nothing's been done about the problem. Chatbots. Know their limitation. We have a chatbot. I set it up. I'm quite proud of it, but the software, it has come a long way, and it is quite good today. I'd encourage you to have a chatbot if you don't have one, but you need to be careful of not overusing them as a deflection tool. Don't create a barrier between your team and your customers. You should use chatbots to solve the simplest issues and provide workarounds, but make the path to contacting a human easy to overcome if the chatbot cannot help. And invest in help center content. Help center articles are an amazing investment. Time put into making them is time well spent. It's the best scalability you'll ever get. And if possible, and that's the most important point, make this content accessible in your game client if you can. And finally, last but not least, always remember that there is a human on the other side of the screen. Customers, they can be a bit abrasive at times. If you worked in support, you know what I mean by that. But in actuality, this irritation, it's just a manifestation of the passion that they have in our products. It's really easy to be annoyed when dealing with a frustrated customer. Sometimes they'll even say things that sound unreasonable or mean. But your players, they just want to play your game. And our job is to make that experience straightforward and painless. Now, if you can instill this kind of customer-centric culture and mentality in your team, then you are going to be successful. All right, so thank you very much. That's the talk. Opening up the floor for Q&A if anyone has any questions.
Thanks a lot, David. Let's applause to our speaker for this great speech. Does anyone have questions to David? Cool. Yeah, let's go first. Yeah, go ahead.
And if anyone has questions later, you can shoot me an email. Feel free to do that.
Great talk, first of all.
Thank you.
I do have a question. At what point in EVE Online, whether in time or concurrent users, did CCP Games decide it was time to invest into customer service?
Right.
At what point would you also recommend other live service games?
Right. So we have a pretty long history actually of wanting to be a customer-centric organization. So the game came out in 2003. Until 2006, CCP outsourced all support. There were no in-house support people at all. There was a telecoms company in Iceland that did all the support. But in 2006, they decided, oh, this isn't really working. So they brought everyone from that team to CCP. It was about 15 people, I think. And since then, we've always had a big core presence at CCP, a support presence. We do outsource, but we have a very strong core team. At that time in EVE's life cycle in 2006, we were growing very rapidly. I think at that time we had just seen a doubling in our DAU in 1 year, so we were growing very rapidly. I would say myself that for any new product, you need to have at least one, preferably more, but you need to have at least one support person there before your game is even launched. And that's so they actually know your product and can support it well on day one. And you want that to be an in-house person. Does that answer your question? Or?
Yes.
Yeah.
Could we take one more?
Yep.
Yeah, all right.
Absolutely.
Hello,
Hi.
good afternoon. Thank you for your talk.
Thank you.
About your meet and greet initiative, I was wondering, where do you approach the players? Are they in social media?
Right.
Do you have specific platforms?
It's inside the game. So we have a chat system inside our game that players use, but we can also use that. So the outreach agents, they actually just have a game client open on a special account. They start a chat conversation with the player, and the player gets a bit of a different UI than from a normal chat window. So they know this is actually an employee. Like the employee has red text while every other player has white text. But yes, it all happens inside the game client.